The city of Greyfield had always been a quiet once, small streets, old brick buildings, and a sense of anonymity that everyone seemed to cherish. But now, there was something unsettling in the air, a feeling that something wasn't right. The same city that once felt peaceful now held its breath, waiting for the next strike. Detective Jackson Hall sat at his desk in the police precinct, the cluttered paper stacks in front of him, a constant reminder of the case he couldn't shake. He had been on the force for 5 years, and never before had he felt the weight of a case like this. It wasn't just about the dead bodies, though they were piling up. It was about the game. The killer was playing a game with them. The first murder had happened 2 weeks ago. A local businessman, Ronald Price, found in his office with no signs of struggle. His throat slashed clean, no prints, no weapons left behind. The only clue, a small white card on the desk with a single word written in red ink: trust. At first, they thought it was a robbery gone wrong, but then it happened again and again. Each victim different, age, background, profession, yet the same eerie signature, a word written in blood left on a card. Jackson rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of exhaustion. The victims' families were grieving, and the public was scared. They wanted answers, but what did he have? A killer who was always one step ahead, leaving only cryptic clues behind. Detective Hall, a voice pulled him from his thoughts. It was Officer Reyes, a young recruit with a nervous habit of tapping his pen against the doorframe. You might want to see this. Jackson stood up and followed Reyes down the narrow hallway. The precinct had been buzzing with activity all morning, but a sense of dread still lingered. They reached the evidence room, where a folder sat on the table, open and waiting. Jackson sat down and glanced at the new piece of evidence. A letter, thick and yellowed with age, though the ink on the page was fresh. Is this another clue from the killer? Jackson asked. Reyes nodded. It was found in the mailbox of the last victim's house just this morning. Jackson flipped the letter open. The words were clear, but the message was haunting. The game begins when you stop pretending. You are all players, but you're not the ones making the moves. Jackson's stomach churned. The killer wasn't just taunting them. He was telling them how much control he had. Each word felt like a blow to his pride. Jackson had worked many difficult cases, but this was different. He was being played. I don't understand, Reyes said, nervously shifting from foot to foot. What does this mean? It means we're not the ones in control. Jackson muttered, his mind racing. The killer's already planned his next move, and he wants us to chase him. The more Jackson read the letter, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. This wasn't just about the victims. It was about Jackson and anyone else who dared to take part in the investigation. This was a personal game, a twisted challenge where the stakes were more than just the lives of the victims. It was a game for the detective's mind, a test of whether they could outwit the murderer. Jackson's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his partner, Detective Claire Mitchell, another body, same method, same signature, but this time, it's someone you know. Jackson's heart sank. He quickly grabbed his jacket. This isn't just a case anymore, he said, more to himself than to Reyes. It's personal. The drive to the crime scene felt like a blur. Jackson's mind was racing as the car weaved through the damp streets of Greyfield. The rain had picked up again, casting the city in an eerie, washed-out glow. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't answer. There was only one thought in his head: who was the next victim? When they arrived at the scene, Jackson's stomach twisted into knots. The house was large, almost too large for a small town like Greyfield. Its Victorian architecture was imposing, its windows dark and vacant like the eyes of a corpse. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Claire Mitchell was already there, standing near the doorway, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She nodded as Jackson approached, but her expression was grim. You know the victim? She asked, her voice cold but steady. Jackson didn't need to ask who she was talking about. Who is it? Your old partner, Detective Ray Thompson. Jackson felt a chill creep up his spine. Ray Thompson, the man who had trained him, the one who had always been there when Jackson needed guidance. Thompson had retired a year ago. tired of the force, tired of the city's corruption. Jackson hadn't seen him since then, but now his former partner's body lay on the floor of a blood-soaked living room. It didn't make sense. Ray was too sharp, too experienced to fall victim to something like this. But there he was, just like the others, sprawled on the floor with a clean, almost surgical wound across his throat. The body was surrounded by a pool of blood, and in his hand Thompson was clutching a card. This time the word "game" was written in deep red ink. Jackson knelt beside the body, trying to focus despite the tightness in his chest. His mind was spiraling. He had thought Ray might be a victim of circumstance, but now the message was clear. The killer knew him, knew who he was, what he had done, and had made him the target. "We need to get this card to the lab," Claire said, breaking his focus. "Maybe there's something we missed, maybe a fingerprint." Jackson stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the room. It felt wrong, like the whole place had been meticulously arranged. Every piece of furniture was in place. The paintings on the wall were aligned perfectly, but there was one thing that stood out: the broken clock on the mantelpiece. It wasn't just damaged, it was stopped at exactly 3:00 a.m. "Claire, take a look at this," he said, pointing to the clock. It stopped. She moved closer, squinting at the time. What does it mean? Jackson thought for a moment. It's part of the game. This killer's not just playing with us. He's trying to tell us something. But what? Was it the time the murder had occurred, or something more symbolic? Jackson's head throbbed as he pondered the question. The killer had left Ray's body for him to find, and the message couldn't be clearer. Jackson was being dragged into this twisted game. The killer wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was watching, waiting for Jackson to make the wrong move. He stood up again and walked toward the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street. His phone buzzed once more. This time he answered it without hesitation. "Hall," he said into the receiver. "We've got something," came the voice of Officer Reyes. "You'll want to see this." Jackson hung up the phone and turned back to Claire, his mind already racing. "Reyes has something for us. We need to get to the lab now." Without another word, they rushed to the car, the urgency of the moment tightening the air around them. The rain hadn't stopped, but the streets of Grayfield felt even more deserted, as though the town itself was holding its breath in anticipation. At the lab, Reyes was waiting for them by the evidence table, a folder clutched tightly in his hands. Jackson approached him, trying to keep his focus sharp. "Talk to me," Jackson said. Reyes didn't waste time. He opened the folder and laid out a series of photos. The first photo was of the card found on Ray Thompson's body. No surprises there. But the next few shots caught Jackson's attention. They were close-up pictures of the blood spatter around the victim's body, along with detailed shots of the carpet fibers beneath the stains. "We found traces of a substance in the blood," Reyes explained, his voice low. "It's not something we usually see in this type of murder. It's a rare chemical compound, used in high-end pharmaceuticals." Jackson's eyebrows shot up. "Pharmaceuticals? What the hell does that have to do with anything?" Reyes flipped to the next photo, showing a bottle of pills with a logo Jackson recognized instantly. Vertec Laboratories. It was a pharmaceutical company that operated just outside the city, known for its cutting-edge medical treatments. But why would a pharmaceutical compound be involved in a murder case? Vertec is connected to at least one of the victims. Reyes continued. Ronald Price, the businessman who was killed in the first murder. He had a business deal with them, according to the records. But... Jackson pressed. Reyes hesitated before continuing, "But there's more. We found something even stranger. The chemical compound in the blood wasn't just any pharmaceutical. It's a drug used in clinical trials for extreme mental states, anxiety, depression, and some severe cases of dissociative identity disorder." Jackson's mind reeled. This wasn't just about revenge or greed. This was something deeper, something psychological. The killer wasn't just trying to hurt people. He was experimenting, playing with their minds, testing them in some twisted way. Claire stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "So what does this tell us? The killer's using a drug to manipulate or control the victims. Jackson rubbed his chin, his mind working through the possibilities. The clues were starting to connect in a disturbing pattern. The game wasn't just physical, it was mental. The killer was toying with his victims, pushing them to their breaking points before ending their lives. Maybe, Jackson said slowly, but I think it's more than that. The killer's been leaving messages, cards with words, trust, game. What if the drug is part of it? What if he's conditioning his victims, making them believe they're playing some kind of twisted game with him? Claire looked uneasy. You're saying he's controlling them mentally, like some sort of puppet master? Exactly, Jackson muttered, and if we're right, he's already targeted someone else, someone we know. Who? Reyes asked, eyes wide with alarm. Jackson's gaze hardened. It's me, I'm the next target. That's part 3, I'll prepare chapter 4 next, wrapping up the story. Let me know what you think. Atmosphere in the precinct was thick with tension. Jackson felt the weight of the words hanging in the air. He was the next target. It didn't matter that he was a detective. It didn't matter that he'd seen more than his fair share of horror on these streets. The killer was playing a game, and Jackson was its final piece. Claire looked at him with a mix of disbelief and concern. We need to get you out of here. The killer's already been to your old partner's house. If he knows about Rey, he knows about you. Jackson shook his head, the intensity in his eyes unwavering. No, I'm staying. The killer's playing with my mind, Claire, but I'm not going to be his pawn. I'm going to end this once and for all. Reyes, who had been silent until now, spoke up. We have a plan, right? We can't just sit here and wait to be picked off one by one. Jackson nodded, though doubt crept into his mind. They were all playing the same dangerous game, and every step they took seemed to lead them closer to the edge. But they needed answers, and they needed them fast. If the killer knew he was next, then Jackson had to get inside the killer's head. You said the chemical compound was used in clinical trials, Claire said, her voice cutting through the tension. Could it have been tested on someone connected to the victims? Maybe that's how the killer got his hands on it. Jackson frowned. I've been thinking the same thing. What if the killer wasn't just involved in the murders? What if he's connected to the pharmaceutical company, Vertec? What if he's part of the trial, one of the test subjects, driven mad by whatever they've been feeding him? Reyes checked his phone. I've pulled up a list of employees at Vertec. There's one name that stands out, Dr. Ethan Harper. He was involved in several of the trials on dissociative identity disorder patients. He was also fired about a year ago after complaints surfaced about his unorthodox methods. Unorthodox methods? Claire echoed, raising an eyebrow. Jackson's stomach tightened. Sounds like the perfect profile for a killer. We need to find Harper. They gathered what little they could from the lab, piecing together the remaining clues. The trail was cold, but they had a name. The rest was up to them. They arrived at Vertec's headquarters an hour later. The building was modern, sleek, with sharp edges that seemed to cut into the sky. But something about it felt sterile, like a place that hid more than it let on. The security guard at the entrance gave them a wary look when they flashed their badges. We need to speak with Dr. Ethan Harper, Jackson said, his voice firm. It's urgent. The guard hesitated, clearly unsure whether to let them through, but after a few tense moments, he stepped aside. 3rd floor, room 307. The elevator ride was silent. Jackson's mind raced with the possibilities. What would they find behind those doors? Was Dr. Harper the killer? Or had he created the perfect monster, a man who could now control the minds of his victims? As they reached the 3rd floor, the tension was palpable. They found room 307 at the end of a long hallway. Jackson stepped forward and knocked once, then twice. No answer. He tried the handle, locked, break it down. Jackson ordered, without hesitation. Reyes kicked the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for the large glass jar on a desk, filled with some sort of dark liquid. Jackson felt a shiver run down his spine. He moved closer, eyeing the jar warily. Inside, suspended in the liquid, was a human brain. Claire gasped. What the hell is this? Jackson turned to the file cabinet in the corner. He opened it quickly, flipping through papers with growing urgency. Then he found it. Doctor, Ethan Harper had been conducting illegal human experiments. Psychiatric experiments meant to induce dissociative identity disorder by chemically altering the brain. This is it, Jackson said, his voice hoarse. Harper wasn't just experimenting on people. He's been creating a monster, testing how far he can push someone before they lose their grip on reality. The door to the office suddenly slammed shut behind them. Jackson spun around, but it was too late. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Ethan Harper himself. Pale, disheveled, his eyes wild. "You're too late," Harper sneered. "The game was never about the victims. It was always about you. You were the final piece." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he raised his gun. "What do you want from me?" Harper smiled, a twisted grin that didn't belong on a man's face. "I don't want anything. I'm just watching you play. I've already won." And then, without warning, Harper lunged at Jackson, faster than he could react. The gunshot echoed in the room as the killer's body crumpled to the floor. Jackson stood frozen, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He had won, but at what cost? As the police arrived to clean up the scene, Jackson stood by the window, staring out at the gray, rain-soaked city. The game was over, the killer was dead, but something inside Jackson had changed. He had been dragged into the killer's twisted world, and though the game was finished, its shadow would always linger. Thanks for watching.